Long before a country called Nigeria existed, this land already had people. Our story begins around 13,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, in the forested hill country of the southwest. At a rock shelter near Akure, now known as Iho Eleru, archaeologists uncovered one of the rare Pleistocene-age hominin finds known anywhere in West Africa. A burial from this period, its position and depth carefully documented. Someone here buried their dead with care, millennia before there was a river called the Niger on any map.
The excavators noted the burial was found undisturbed within a clear later Stone Age layer, its position and depth carefully documented. Evidence, they argued, that this was a deliberate interment rather than an accidental deposit.
10,000 years pass. We arrive on the Jos Plateau, in the heart of the land between the Niger and Benue rivers, sometime around the 5th century before Christ. Here, over the next 7 centuries, until roughly 200 years after Christ, an archaeological culture now known as Nok flourished. Alongside early ironworking, evidenced at furnace sites such as Taruga, its people produced something unprecedented in this part of Africa: life-size terracotta heads and figures, hollow and coil-built, with eyes stylized into elegant triangles. No one knows for certain how this society was organized, or why, after 7 centuries, its traces become scarce in the archaeological record. Seven centuries after Nok fades from the record, far to the southeast, in what is today Anambra State, a very different kind of society leaves its own mark. In 1939, a man digging a well in the town of Igbo Ukwu struck bronze. What archaeologists later uncovered, a shrine, a burial chamber, a cache of regalia, is dated to the 9th century of our era and stands among the earliest and most remarkable bronze assemblages known in West Africa, predating Ife and Benin by centuries. The man buried at its center was surrounded by ivory and by tens of thousands of imported glass beads, some traced to workshops near Cairo, more than 3,000 kilometers away. Long before any European ship reached this coast, this corner of the forest was already in contact with the wider world. Oral tradition links this wealth to Unri, a ritual authority remembered as governing through purification rites and titles rather than armies, though exactly how far its influence extended remains a subject of scholarly debate.
Shaw described the bronze and copper work as artistically self-sufficient. Its motifs, casting technique, and even its ore sources bore, in his account, no clear resemblance to anything else known from outside the region, which he took as evidence of a locally invented tradition rather than an imported one.
This same land, across many centuries, including the era we have just described, and long after it, also held societies that never organized around a single ruler at all. Among the Tiv, in the Benue River Valley, authority ran through lineage and age-grade councils. Across much of Igbo land, in the southeast, villages governed themselves through councils of elders, title societies, and open assemblies, real political institutions, simply not built around a throne, a pattern colonial officials, expecting kings everywhere, would later struggle to recognize. Further southeast, the Ibibio organized through similar village group federations, and at Old Calabar, on the Cross River, the Efik built one of the region's great trading towns around the Ekpe Leopard Society, a masked institution that enforced law, regulated trade, and bound rival trading houses into a single working order in the absence of any single ruler. Most of what is documented about these systems in detail comes from the 18th and 19th centuries, though the underlying pattern is almost certainly far older. 3 to 4 centuries after Igbo Ukwu, and further southwest, in what is today Osun State, Ile Ife. In Yoruba tradition, the world itself began here, where the deity Oduduwa is said to have descended and cast the first earth upon primordial water. Archaeology shows a settlement already substantial by around the 8th to 11th century, and by the 13th and 14th centuries, Ife had become a major urban and artistic center, renowned for brass and terracotta sculpture cast with a naturalism distinctive in the region at that time. Yoruba oral tradition holds that many royal lines trace back to this one city, a claim rooted in shared tradition more than in any single verified genealogy. A century after Ife's artistic peak, southeast of it, in what is now Edo State, the kingdom of Benin had grown into a large, centralized kingdom, grown, according to tradition, from a prince sent to resolve a royal succession. By the 15th century, it was known for an extensive network of earthworks, ditches, and banks whose full combined extent is still debated by archaeologists, and for royal bronze casting, a monopoly of the Oba's court. Guild artists cast commemorative heads and hundreds of relief plaques, a visual chronicle of the kingdom's own history, mounted on the palace's pillars. Then, in the 1480s, Portuguese ships reached its coast for the first time, and Benin dealt with them as an equal, on its own terms, for nearly 4 centuries that followed.
Cataloguers note that many of the palace plaques were taken down from their pillars sometime in the 17th century and placed in storage, meaning the British forces of 1897 found them not on display, but boxed away in an otherwise empty building.
We now step sideways in time, far to the northeast, around Lake Chad, in what is today Borno State and the neighboring lands of Chad and Niger. Another kind of state had been taking shape over a very long period, running in parallel with much of what we have already seen. One built not on forest bronze, but on cavalry and the trans-Saharan caravan trade. Kanem Bornu's rulers, the Mai, adopted Islam gradually from around the 11th century and, over the centuries that followed, relocated and rebuilt their capital more than once, enduring overall as one of the longest-lived states in African history. Salt, horses, and cloth came south across the desert. Kola nuts, ivory, and captives went north. A trade that linked this stretch of the Sahel to Tripoli and Cairo, more than 2,000 kilometers away, centuries before any European ship ever reached this coast.
Cohen's ethno-historical account traces how the merger of Kanembu and Bornu populations following the dynasty's relocation west of Lake Chad produced over time a new shared identity and language, the Kanuri, rather than a simple continuation of the older Kanem population.
South and west of Bornu, a related but distinct story was unfolding over these same broad centuries. No single empire ever formed among the Hausa. Instead, from around the 11th century onward, several walled city-states, including Kano, Katsina, Zazau, Gobir, Rano, Daura, and Biram, developed as independent but interconnected urban centers tied to trade, craft production, and scholarship. Dyed cloth in Kano, market trade in Katsina, soldiers in Zazau, where, in the 16th century, Queen Amina is remembered for extending her city's reach through conquest. Rivals as often as allies, they prospered for centuries, until, in 1804, a reform movement from Gobir changed everything.
Adimo describes the Hausa states as bound less by common government than by shared language, overlapping trade circuits, and a common origin narrative, a confederation of rivals rather than a single polity, which he argues left them both prosperous and structurally vulnerable.
That year, 1804, in Gobir, in the far northwest, the scholar Usman Dan Fodio driven into exile by the city's ruler, launched a reform movement calling for a return to Islamic law against what he saw as unjust rule. Over the following decade, a coalition of religious reformers, Fulani clan leaders, and disaffected Hausa communities, through shifting alliances as much as sustained war, brought down the old Hausa city-states one by one, folding them into a single new order, the Sokoto Caliphate. By 1837, a generation later, it stretched nearly 1,000 miles from present-day Burkina Faso to northern Cameroon, the most populous state in West Africa at the time, governed through emirs and notably through a body of teaching that also called for the education of women. To the south, in Yorubaland, a kingdom that had risen a century before Sokoto was now entangled in its own crisis. Oyo had grown, from the 17th century onward, into the most powerful Yoruba kingdom of its time. Its cavalry and its councils holding together a wide network of tribute-paying towns. From the later 18th century, succession disputes and military setbacks weakened this system, and in 1817, one of Oyo's own commanders, stationed at Ilorin, rebelled and allied with the jihadist armies advancing from Sokoto, far to the north. Ilorin became a caliphate emirate. Old Oyo, worn down by the decades of war that followed, was abandoned by the 1830s.
Law argues that Oyo's council system, the Oyo Messi, was designed to check royal power, but that this same structure, meant to prevent tyranny, became a source of paralysis during the succession crises of the early 19th century, precisely when unified leadership was most needed.
While these inland kingdoms and caliphates rose and fell, a very different, much longer story had been unfolding along the coast since the 17th century and would run on into the 19th, the Atlantic slave trade. From the Bight of Biafra in the southeast, large numbers of captives were taken over this period, many of them Igbo, funneled to the coast through inland trading networks. From the Bight of Benin further west, Lagos rose as a major port of export over the same long span. This was never something done only from outside. Coastal kingdoms, inland states, and trading networks across this region, including some of the decentralized societies we have just seen, were active participants, and its human cost fell permanently on those who were carried away.
Northrop traces how inland trading networks, such as the Aero, developed elaborate credit and escort systems specifically to move captives toward the coast. An organized commercial infrastructure, he stresses, not a simple chain of isolated raids.
That trade came under pressure from 1807, when Britain outlawed its own slave trade and spent the following decades enforcing that ban along this coast, while palm oil gradually replaced captives as the region's chief export. 90 years later, in February 1897, a British party marching toward Benin City, in what is now Edo State, against the Oba's explicit orders, was ambushed. Britain's response was overwhelming. Within weeks, the British punitive expedition attacked Benin City, burned the palace, and removed an estimated several thousand artworks, objects now known as the Benin Bronzes, sending the Oba into exile. The kingdom that had dealt with Europe as an equal for centuries was, in this single season, absorbed into a colony. 3 years after Benin fell, the same colonial push reached the far north. Between 1900 and 1903, Frederick Lugard led campaigns against the emirates of the Sokoto Caliphate, until Kano and Sokoto itself fell. His solution was to govern through the emirs, who submitted, a model he called indirect rule, later applied elsewhere in the British Empire, and one that would shape the political culture of the North for a century to come. 11 years after that conquest, on the 1st of January 1914 in Lagos, the British formally amalgamated the northern and southern territories we have just followed into a single colony, Nigeria. This was an administrative and fiscal decision, not a consensual political union. It used surpluses from the commercially developed South to cover the North's administrative deficit, without any shared political or religious foundation between the two halves. Nationalists in Lagos protested at the time. Northern leaders, decades later, voiced their own doubts about the union. So the country the world calls Nigeria was, in this single administrative act, drawn into existence over a landscape that already carried more than 13,000 years of human history, kingdoms and empires, but also villages, lineages, and leopard societies that had never needed a single ruler at all.